Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, and thanks for spending some time with us. It's Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and you're joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. Today, I'm joined by Baiba. Thank you so much for making time.
Yeah, it's so great to connect with you, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So, big question. Tell me about who you are and why you do what you do.
Yeah, so I am a podcast host, and in addition to that, I also have had a career in talent acquisition, also known as recruiting in the corporate for the last 15 years. And so my passion is really talking as well as working with women. And sometimes it's not just women, but that's, I guess, my sweet spot on really finding that thing, finding that work that will be energizing and fulfilling for you, and that's in line with what you came here to do.
Yeah, how did you get on that path?
It's probably, well, it's through my own journey, because I've been on the journey myself. And that's why, so I was working and have been working with in corporate America on talent acquisition teams, ended up leading talent acquisition teams, here in United States and also in Europe. Um, and so and over the years, I've talked to thousands of job seekers, and there have been several times when I reflected myself and asked the question, is this the right job for me? There have been times, where I have felt burnt out, where it has really gotten to me, the stress level has been high, where it's taken the toll on my health. And there have been several times where I explored, um, and have gone on this deeper journey myself. So I started the podcast with the intention, as I looked for answers and experiences that I've gone through, that I can share with, and also interview and talk to other women um, who share their journeys and tools in an effort. I think we are all unified in this united in this human experience. And I think so many times we find our puzzle pieces. I think, like, if I think about our work and career or life's work or business, it doesn't have to be like a 9 to 5, whatever it is for any given person. I see it as a big puzzle. And there are those few people who are uh, quote unquote lucky or fortunate, who know right away from the get-go, right? I'm gonna be this, and they get on that path and they have no questions or um, doubts about it. But majority of people, somewhere along the way, the conditioning, the good old advice, from people who have influences, around us, school, parents, family members, society, country, right? Where have we grown up? All of these are very, very strong influences, right? And as a kid, many times it can be very hard to stay grounded in your own knowing or follow your own path because of it. So I find that so many people, I think more than 50%, are still kind of like, you can check the boxes. And I largely know also for myself, like in many ways, I checked many boxes, but inside of me, I still felt like some things like I feel drained, I don't feel energized by certain things, that I'm doing. And that it has cascading effects on your life, on how much you have to give to your family, your kids, your friends, your health. So that is why I'm very, very passionate about this subject.
So that's fascinating. So literally, I mean, to backtrack from where you were experiencing that yourself and knew that others were. So you really kind of leaned into supporting others on their own journey.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like this is kind of our we can like I think it's probably not Oprah who said it, or it might be that she quoted somebody else, that sometimes you teach what you need to learn most, and through that, through people you find answers, and through other people's stories and through situations, kind of I see life as this beautiful alchemy. So alchemy is how I see alchemy is this transformation. It's a process of going from where you are to where you want to be. And if you have read, there's this famous book by Paulo Coelho called The Alchemist. And literally, it's the story, because the alchemy, right, is I think, the chemical process of taking a regular metal and transforming it into gold or precious metal. And the story that Paulo Coelho wrote is um, interesting, because he said the book is also his own journey towards writing. And so essentially, the alchemy is transforming, right, and going from where you are to where your heart is desiring to be.
What advice would you give others that maybe don't feel like they're living their passion right now when it comes to kind of their career path or what their journey looks like?
Yeah. So that's a big question. So first is probably just taking a note and starting to validate that voice, right? Because it's so easy to one of the things that I see, and I know it also I went through it myself, that it's not comfortable in a way, but it's familiar to stay where you're at. If you're working for a company, you have a certain amount of money coming in, right? You know the people you work with, you kind of know this path, and it's easy to stay and kind of stay in that place of wondering and kind of imagining that there can be something better, knowing, but not doing anything about it. So I think the biggest advice would be taking, even if it's a tiny step, towards exploring it, towards exploring something.
No, I think that's good. I feel like life gets uncomfortable when you're not on the path that you're meant to be on, right? When there's a higher good or a higher situation that you're not even seeing, like life gets uncomfortable along the way to really kind of poke you to realize that there's other things.
Yeah. And it kind of, I think it has to, because the human nature, and again, going back, that somehow we just stay in the familiar, and we most of the times will not take the steps to change anything unless we are pushed. What I see is many times, you will there will be effects on your health, right? Or because the years you just kind of keep doing the same thing and not really taking active steps towards a change. There also you can get laid off, so it's literally the God universe, or whatever you believe, almost has to come in and push us towards in a different direction if we won't do it
Yeah.
actively ourselves.
And I live that, right? That is absolutely my story too, going from, television 20 years and my grandpa passing and getting, gently nudged into finance to be able to help my grandma make sense of investing. So I live that and I totally get that too. Do you feel that right now you're living your true passion, being able to help others and support others in this way?
I would say I'm still on the journey to be I want to be very honest and transparent. I mean, I think in a bigger scheme of things, this life is about evolution and growth. And I don't think we ever get there, whatever, or when we get there, there's always the goalpost gets moved, because like if you look at nature, right, the spring and the leaves come out, the flowers bloom, and then the flowers go away, right? And the pollen comes out, and then the fall comes and the green leaves change. So there's always this constant change. um I think I love the analogy that you shared. Like you said, we had a conversation prior to this conversation about the river and the stream of river. I actually have a creek and behind my backyard, and it's always flowing, right? It's
Mhm.
not really, I mean, it's very rare where I don't know that it's ever still. So I don't know that I will ever get there, because I've always had this, something in me is planted where it's like this level of dissatisfaction, for better or worse. There's always like some sort of drive for the next step.
It's continuous growth, right? Continuous growth.
Yes, that's what we will call it. But I also heard an interview that not everybody, we're all so unique. And this is the beauty, I think, of this life and this world. And so many times, I think this is one of humanity's biggest problems, that we want to make others be like ourselves, or others live the way we think life should be lived. But inherently, there's diversity, there's variety in this life on this planet. And I think, going back, there's always that growth and change.
Well, transitioning wise, I mean, this goes hand in hand with really money memories. Everybody's different. We can all learn from each other. I mean, I don't want everyone to look the same, be the same, because we have so much to give and to be able to share and learn from each other. So, one question I like to ask is money memories. What's a money memory that you had as a younger person or teenager that helped mold your relationship to money as an adult? And the cool thing is, everybody has such a different, unique answer.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say that my money memories are probably pretty messed up. So I think that my example, whatever I am living, is I'm trying to live or build something very different than what I saw. I saw a lot of dysfunction in terms of my parents' relationship, and that involved the financial piece. So I definitely don't have the best money memories. And one of them, and this is what I was telling you, you must hear some really interesting stories, when you ask people this question, because it's kind of behind the closed doors, right? And like you said, many times we don't even talk about it, but it's such a shaping um, experience when you grow up and you see this for years. For example, I grew up in a household where my dad had all the power, and I actually grew up in a very different system. So I was born in what was Soviet Union at the time. I was about in elementary school, close to middle school, when the system came down, when the Berlin Wall came down. So it was a very different period for people who lived there, for my parents, who went from everything, the government telling you this is how the world works and how the financial system works and government takes care of you in your adulthood, to essentially now everything is upside down and the world works completely differently, and there's no, the government or the socialism is not taking care of you to that extent anymore. You're on your own.
You are listening to the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
Hey, it's Jennifer. I wanted to take a quick break to remind you that you are worthy to have a seat at the table when it comes to money and your finances. We, both me and my team at Platinum Wealth Management, want to meet you where you are, whether you're starting out, starting over, or have been investing for years. Reach out to us at platinumwealth.net or call us at 775-717-0001. We'd be honored to help.
And now, back to the podcast.
And it was kind of a wild, wild west, and quite a crazy experience, I think, for my parents. But I also saw very different approaches. It was not only the relationship dynamic where my dad had all the power, with money, and my mom didn't have any. She felt so dependent on my dad that she was even scared to leave a bad relationship because she didn't feel confident enough in herself and being able to provide for her and her kids. So I saw a very dysfunctional dynamic, and even to the point where I remember I really had a pretty strong feelings against my dad, like to the what you could call like hate at times, where I was literally I would he had when this transition was happening from Soviet Union to quote unquote freedom, which it was like more like wild wild west at the time, and he took the opportunity to go into entrepreneurship, and he had at the time a lot of money, but he wasn't giving it to his family. Like it was actually going for his entertainment, like totally outside of his family and his kids. And I remember one pretty vivid memory where there were times I would steal money from my dad as a kid because I just felt everything was just so messed up, that I was seeing, around the home dynamic.
Thank you for sharing and being raw and vulnerable on that. Do you
Yeah.
feel that, I mean, kind of thinking back on the money memories, that you've changed the narrative for yourself from where you are now?
I mean, in many ways, yes. I think I've tried to run away and kind of do everything I can to do the opposite and be self-sufficient, and independent in a way that I don't have to rely on anybody, that I can take care of myself, that I would never put up with behavior like that. So I came to a country that's across halfway the world, from the Eastern Bloc, to United States, and made a life for myself. And I mean, I own a home, and my mom doesn't own a home. My dad doesn't own a home, so in a way, yes, I've rewritten it in a kind of what we call in a more Western society to more successful model, money wise.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, kind of going hand in hand with that conversation goes into financial infidelities. What's a financial infidelity that you've experienced or witnessed, for that matter, that you think others could learn from?
I mean, for me, I don't know if others can learn from it, but for me, the biggest infidelity probably was how my dad had a company, and at the time was making, good money, but was totally not like, we lived in a very poor conditions in an apartment, and he was not, investing or using any of that money for his family. So that was definitely an infidelity, and probably the biggest infidelity I've seen in my life.
Do you find yourself being more giving because of what you experienced?
I mean, even then, it's so funny. Like I would steal because I was so angry at my dad, and it goes more just not the money, but also how he treated my mom, right? And the person he
Yeah.
was. That I would steal the money and I would take my friends out to the cafe for like lunch or for cakes or something like that. So I feel like I always have had generosity in me, and wanting to share.
Well, thank you for sharing. So, as we start to wrap the conversation, one thing I like to ask is, what are tips and or tricks that you use to utilize money differently in your own household?
Tips or tricks that I utilize to use money differently.
Some people, like for example, some people will shop on, just vintage. So they love vintage stuff, they resell it. Some people will keep a money journal of knowing exactly where their money is and auditing, how many Netflix subscriptions do I have, or what does this look like? Some people will go to, the grocery store on certain days because that's where they have the fresh fruit and that's how they budget their, situation. Some people budget, some people don't. So everybody's answer is always different and very unique.
So I think my trick or tip has always been to make money, to generate income. Um, I probably had the opposite push and aversion to, because when I was younger, I had to go to the secondhand stores, and I had to like get the coat as a Christmas present. From those times, I gone the opposite way, that I want to buy what I want for myself, and I want to buy, and I also don't want to save on spending for good food, and kind of the life's necessities. And so in many ways, it's kind of what shapes us, that kind of that childhood. I saw the lack, that I'm driven not to have them. And I
Mm.
think that another thing, the tip for others, I mean, that served me well, is I think or a big peace of mind. What can bring you a big peace of mind is having savings, right? And kind of keeping, with that comes this inherent. I know that we can't really source the profound. I'm also a very spiritual person, and I know in this kind of 3D world, money, financial freedom equals, or finances equal freedom and safety. I know that ultimately at the baseline level, we can't source safety in any external things, but in our world, to calm our anxious minds and our egos, having some sort of savings, right? That, like, okay, if you get laid off, if something happens, right? That you have some sort of like a backup to go to, for several months. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, that's great. That's one thing that we talk about too, is emergency money, right? If things hit the fan in your world, that's your first line of defense to go into. And some people, it's having 3 months of emergency money on the sideline. Some people, it's 6 months. It could be, more depending on what your situation is. But
Yeah.
really giving that, back to your thought, that peace of mind of being able to know where you go in case things hit the fan in your world.
Yeah, and then the other thing, I think this is how I've lived, and I know that's not how everybody lives, but of course, when you say tips and tricks, I would say, if something happens and you lose your income, let's say it's the job, is for me, it's always been, I never waited to find the perfect job, and to have the months roll by. I will, whether it's anxiety driven, whether it's right or wrong, but I will take an interim job to have, like, there's nothing, the sense of having money coming in, it's like there's this kind of the mentally, psychologically, I think there's, it gives you a boost, and it gives you this sort of independence and level of freedom to keep looking for something. Like, let's say if you were laid off, to have this power versus this neediness, right? When you, and kind of different mindset, when you all, as you continue to look for the perfect job, I always advise people that it's okay to take something in the interim, even if kind of this is a strategy, this is a short-term strategy, versus waiting 6-8 months unemployed.
Yeah, that's a great call, because I think people do search for what they find is that perfect job, and sometimes that can take some time. So being open to do something in the interim, something that obviously that you enjoy, right, to a certain extent, to be able to give yourself that much more time to really search and find out what your next step is.
Yeah. Yeah. Financial, I mean, it can make a big difference financially.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and spending some time today.
Thank you, Jennifer. So nice to talk to you and connect.
Yeah, you as well. And hopefully those of you listening and or watching will join us on the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.